with us your views and the Microsoft roadmap. I think that many people here in the audience, as cyber experts or cyber followers, are really in this debate of cloud security, and your views and ideas and even new generation of concepts are really important information for this discussion. I would like to invite our next speaker, Rick Echevarria, VP Software and Services Group, GM of Platform Security Division in Intel Corporation. Please, Rick.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. For most people in the US, Friday and Saturday night are usually their favorite time. It's a time when everybody's ready to relax or they're ready to party. For me, Friday and Saturday nights around 11:15 becomes a nightmare. And it becomes a nightmare because I have 4 children, most of them pretty old to be out enjoying themselves, but my wife insists that no matter how old they are, they should be home by midnight. So at 11:15, no matter how much I want to relax, my wife is nudging me and saying, start texting them. They need to come home. And the one thing that I hope and pray when I'm texting them to come home, because they won't respond to her text, they respond to my text, right? As the authority figure, you think, is that they're not reading that text while they're driving. Because if you look at the statistics around the world, you notice that cars, something that we know so well, something that we've been dealing with for such a long time, yet we see an increasing rate of accidents and loss of life. And it's because in a data-driven world, we want information real time, and sometimes we're willing to risk ourselves just to get and just to consume that data. So my talk this afternoon is about security in an autonomous driving world. Okay? And why is Intel talking about autonomous driving? Well, autonomous driving is a great opportunity for the industry. And if you think about the concept of security and safety, it all starts with a hardware foundation. And in that hardware foundation, we're committed to delivering an important number of usages. Everything from secure boot, which we don't think about much in a car, but in an autonomous world, you will need and you would want assurances around secure boot, secure storage, cryptography, not only today's cryptography, but future crypto acceleration, trusted execution environments, and something that you're going to hear us spend a lot of time talking about and partnering with the industry, which is resilient artificial intelligence algorithms. Now, if you think about the concept of the car, and this is what's so fascinating as we look at the autonomous car world, it's that security in this context is about a lot of moving parts, no pun intended. You have to protect electronic control units. You have to protect in-vehicle networks. You have to protect sensors from misbehaving. You have to protect the communications between the vehicle and the infrastructure. You also have to protect that data that's flowing all the way from the vehicle and the cloud and back, and all the transactions that are going to happen in between, right? It's a lot of technologies that the data flows. You have to protect the user privacy. And as I mentioned, you have to protect the algorithms that we're trusting in an autonomous world. When I look at that, I go, damn, that's a lot of technology to deal with. That's a lot of complexity to deal with. That's a lot of surface to deal with. And complexity and surface area are the biggest enemies of defenders, right? But this is something that we have to do. So I'm going to try in the simplest way to describe Intel's efforts in security for autonomous vehicles. And there are 3 areas that we're focusing on. The first one is protecting the vehicle and the foundation of the vehicle. This is going to require a lot of technologies, including a lot of hardware technologies. And not only are we committing to working with the industry to secure the vehicle, we have to worry about the integrity of the communications of the vehicle. And that leads me to the second part of our strategy around autonomous vehicle security, which is the security of the communications and the connectivity from the vehicle to the infrastructure and everything else that that vehicle is going to be connecting with. Other vehicles, other moving parts in the world that we live in. We have to ensure that any data that leaves that vehicle and goes back and forth is coming from a trusted source. It hasn't been tampered with. And by the way, we have to do that at the lowest latency possible, right? This is a true real-time systems that we're talking about. Finally, and the third element of our strategy is the protection of three things: the data, the algorithms, and then the privacy of the users. Because in an autonomous world, the privacy of the user, it's a very different context from what we've known today. So, let me spend the rest of the presentation, I'm going to talk about these three areas: securing the vehicle, securing the communications, and then the steps to secure the data, the algorithms, and the user privacy. Following? Yes? All right. So let me start with the secure the vehicle. This is quite a complex topic, like I said before, with a lot of different moving parts. And if you just take a look at a vehicle, similar to the one that you may see on screen, this vehicle can have as many as 100 electronic control units, 200 microprocessors, of course we love that, it's good demand for our business, and at least 9 networks with a lot of different protocols. And then it's interesting that we're sitting here following our colleagues at Microsoft, because they must love the fact that today's vehicles require about 100 million lines of code. And when you think about autonomous vehicles, the number of lines of codes to operate this new mode of transformation goes up by a factor of 3. 300 million lines of code. That's a tremendous challenge to secure. Now, what are we going to do about this? So, first and foremost, we have to establish a basis of trust when it comes to operating the vehicle. So, our plan is to collaborate with the industry to ensure that we are establishing the right chain of trust in vehicles. We have to attest to every system in the vehicle. Not only each individual system, but how these systems are going to interact. We also have to make sure that we enable critical code to be isolated within a trusted environment. So a lot of engineering that's going to go into these vehicles. What else do we have to do to secure vehicles? We have to add and support a number of different technologies. Software isolation is going to be very important. Whitelisting is going to be very important. Being able to enforce control flows in the vehicle is going to be important. And for those of you who deal in the key and certificate management space, which there's probably a few here, lots of opportunities for you to manage not only the authenticity of these, but the management of the life cycle of keys and certificates. Lots of challenges for us in the cyber world. Now, sticking with the vehicle security, there's 2 other areas that we're focusing on. The second one, it's a research around self-adaptive mechanisms for the car. We want the car, by the way, to evaluate and modify its behavior. Not only do we want to do this for efficiency purposes, but we do want these cars to have some level of self-protection, and we want these vehicles to have some level of self-correction. Okay? So we have to invest in this space. And these self-adaptive and self-healing mechanisms are going to be absolutely necessary for autonomy. One more area in the vehicle security space, which is working in ways in which we give the user a seamless experience, especially when it comes to dealing with their interaction with the vehicle. Okay? When you're talking about autonomous vehicles, and you're also talking about this concept of us transacting through the vehicles, you now have to worry about a number of different areas that are typically reserved for computing. Multi-factor authentications, biometrics in the vehicle. We want to use that multi-factor authentication to ensure that we have the right owner riding the right vehicle, accessing the right data and credentials. We also want to use biometric technologies and real-time interactions with the user so we can detect, for example, if somebody's falling asleep in the car, and we can then self-correct. It's an amazing amount of technology. You'll hear me say that time and time again. Now, all that work is just to handle the security of the vehicle. Let's talk about securing the communication, the connectivity of the vehicle. And why is this so important? It's important because without the real-time connectivity, we're not going to be able to reduce the number of accidents. That's how I set the context for this conversation. We need connectivity at low latency because these vehicles are going to be interacting with a real-life environment. Not only other vehicles, pedestrians, pets, real-time objects. And the third reason why this is important is because part of our motivation here, and I used the term efficiency before, but I do know that when I come visit Tel Aviv, which is pretty frequently, traffic becomes a really big deal. So wouldn't we want to leverage this infrastructure so we can get to places faster in a more efficient way? After all, time is our most valuable asset, right? So these are the motivations for focusing on that connectivity. And in this space, we're going to put a tremendous amount of focus on the connectivity being secure and low latency. And since you all sit here, and most of you, if not all of you, are cyber professionals, you know that that's very challenging, right? Security and performance, security and low latencies, not that natural of an interaction. It doesn't happen. It's going to require a lot of engineering. And this is where the promise of 5G is going to be realized. And that's why we're so committed to our investments in 5G. The promise of high speed, low latency, and security. That's why, as an industry, we're all rallying behind 5G and 5G standards. And in fact, we're putting our investments and our focus in participating and being very active in standards, including the 5G Automotive Association, of which we're a member of. If you look at the standards being written for 5G, they do include identity and authentication and interactions between the vehicle and the infrastructure and the vehicle and other vehicles. And we absolutely intend to support those standards. Now, this discussion wouldn't be complete without the third part of our security strategy, which is the data, the security of the algorithms, and the user privacy. You've probably heard Intel in its describe them as data centers on wheels. And that's because our assumption, our expectation, or what we've measured is that these vehicles are going to generate 4 terabytes per data, right? And that's per vehicle, per day. That's a lot of data, again, to manage, to process, to protect. We also need to protect the algorithms that we're trusting in an autonomous world. And again, as I mentioned, the privacy of the user. So let's talk about each one of these, starting with the data. We got to protect the data from the inside, going to the outside and coming back, right? Lots of hops that data is going to take through the infrastructure. And in order to achieve this, no surprise, we will focus on the themes that I've mentioned earlier: encryption, connectivity, and the proper use of trusted execution environments along the path that the data traverses. Okay? And that's going to be very important, again, because we have a very complex equation here of security, latency, as we're protecting the data as it goes across. Okay? The second element that we're going to do is protecting the algorithms. The algorithms are really important. You got to think about the fact that these neural algorithms are becoming more and more popular, right? And they're being used to process things like vision, speech recognition, image classification. Just think about that, right? You have a machine that's seeing for you, thinking for you, making decisions for you, and we have to expect that they do it better than humans. Otherwise, what's the point? Right? Otherwise, what's the point? The challenge is that these algorithms, just like anything digital, they can be exploited. And so this, by the way, is where our partnership with academia and the ecosystem comes into play. And we are going to be very proud of the work we're doing with Tel Aviv University and the work we're doing with Georgia Tech and the work we're doing with Princeton, specifically focusing on resiliency in these artificial intelligence algorithms. Really important work. And again, our collaboration here with Tel Aviv University is going to be very, very important to our future roadmap. The last point is around user privacy. And when you think about user privacy, there's aspects of vehicles that are now storing your data and they know something about you that you have to be paying attention to. Now, I don't know how many of you drive or have bought a used car, but if you look at the life cycle of a car, it's usually 5 to 10 years. I was laughing when I was writing this speech with my assistant, and I said, who the heck has a car more than 10 years old? And he says, I do. My car is 12 years old. Well, when you think about that, you're going to take your car, you're going to drive it for a certain amount of time, and then you're going to sell that car. And the last thing you want is the new owner to have access to your credit card, have access to your credentials, have access to your contacts, have access to the life that you've been living inside of the car. So we have to make sure that we build the right types of technologies and workflows that enables us to, as they say, wipe the slate clean as you're moving in terms of ownership. But there's actually one issue here that I think, as we were getting ready for this, brought this really to life, which is the fact that recently we had the mayor of a European city whose movements were being tracked through the smart parking infrastructure. And that's why this concept of building privacy into the communications of the vehicle and into the data of the vehicle becomes really important. And we have spent significant amount of time looking at this issue. We actually have built into our silicon technologies that are privacy aware to address issues like this. We still want the data, we still want the benefits of autonomous driving, but we can't compromise on this level of privacy. It's a matter of safety. So, let me summarize. What's our focus when it comes to autonomous driving and security autonomous driving is in 3 areas. The first one is the security of the vehicle. Lots of technologies inside of the vehicle for us to manage and secure. The second one is on the protection of the communications, the connectivity from the vehicle, the infrastructure, and again, delivering that with low latency because these are real-time systems. And then the third element of our security strategy is protecting the data, protecting the algorithms, and protecting the privacy of the user. We look forward to the road ahead, the collaboration with the ecosystem, and the great opportunities for innovation that autonomous driving, and specifically security for autonomous driving, present to all of us here. Thank you.